how may investors in Romania ensure that they have robust asset management strategies in place? And I wonder if we have a volunteer by the name of either René or by the name of Russell.
Let me start. Does everybody know what we mean by asset management? What do we think asset management is? Because I had a problem with some clients recently, and they said, we don't like this word asset management because we employ a manager or we employ a management company. So why do you want to be the asset manager for my hotel? And I said, okay, so let's call it something different. And I ended up calling it Owner's Representative Services, because that's how I felt the relationship between what I do and what my team does and the owner of the property that I was talking to. So I think more in terms of an asset management role as being standing in the middle of the relationship between the owner or the investor, whatever you want to call it, and the manager or the management company, whatever you happen to employ. And I think that gives a better relationship, because what the owner's representative is a critical friend. A bit like if anybody here parents? Anybody here a parent? Anybody got children? Yeah? Children are at school or have been at school. Schools have teachers, yes. Schools have volunteers who are called, in my country, governors. And a school governor is there not to beat the head teacher over the head, but to act as a critical friend, to bounce ideas off, and so forth. So that's how I regard the relationship. And so asset management, which we'll continue to use as a term, just otherwise we'll get confused. I see the role in any country, whether it's Romania or not, is helping the owner to maximize the value of their investment. And as long as you're doing that, that's fine. So, I watched your presentation just now, and I thought to myself, okay, it's all very well, but is the effort required to, for example, put that schedule together with the housekeeping and whatever, is that worth the saving in costs that you can do? And have you got the flexibility in your labor policies to be able to flex your staffing, to be able to receive those? So everything has to be cost effective. But a professional who is well versed in these issues will know how to put together a plan and evaluate alternatives that should, at the end of the day, either increase revenue or reduce costs, or both, but ultimately increase profit, but most importantly, cash flow. Because cash flow is the key to value, not profit, cash flow. Is that good enough to start?
Pretty good, yeah, pretty good. Thanks, Russell. Anybody else like to add to that?
I would like to try my version of reality, and I feel like I'm the only panelist which is not from the hospitality. I'm coming from the finance banking side, and I must say that this is the first time after being with you guys all day long that I consider the banking business very easy. I mean, from what I learned from you until now, well, I find it as a very complicated business. And quite honestly, when we talk about asset management, we, the capital side, are used with the asset management.
It's not really complicated. We just talk about it and make it more complicated than it really is. We are doing the same. Exactly.
We are doing the same with our customers, when we talk much about interest rates and so on. But what I realized is that at the end of the day, it's not that hard of a topic, but in this hospitality industry you have three main or key things which you must take care of. One is the tangible asset, which obviously for myself, having an asset management background, it's very easy to evaluate, because you know how much it brings, and there you have the yield. On the other hand, you have the intangible asset, and I was taking a look to the top operators in Romania, and only 4% of the total hotels are affiliated to one large operator. So it means that the intangible asset, the goodwill of hospitality, is still low in Romania, but it will grow. And I think that this goodwill is the one that is gathering customers towards the industry, because you wanna be part of a renowned name. Now the third aspect, which is extremely relevant from my point of view, is human resource. Who is bringing your customer? Because you have these intermediaries between the hotels and the final customer. You have your employees and so on. And you are not controlling these employees because they start from below level of wages. They are just teenagers, young, let's say, professionals. On the other hand, some of you said earlier that they do not speak with a British accent, whether they are in a British company or on Parisian soil. They do not speak as a French. So you have all these things. On the other hand, and hopefully you won't be shutting my mic off, but there is a lack of sexiness in it, because when we talk about investments as asset managers, you know, there is a hype for equity, there is a hype for tech, there is a hype for many other things. But when it comes about hospitality, I never saw any investor, meaning individual investor, being extremely willing in a capital-intensive industry to invest his money with large multiples in a short period of time. So this means that the industry itself, hospitality, is a capital-intensive one. It's a lot of logistics that you have to take care of. And at the end of the day, it's very hard to be sold for an investor for the easy money. So you have to have a very explicit speech. You have to have people willing to invest in a smart long-term, on a long-term journey. And just take a look to what is happening nowadays in Eastern Europe with some countries with elections and so on. So the long-term means a couple of days. So all these things are extremely relevant in your business. Now, going back to your question, because you were asking how can a Romanian, or at least if I got the question right, how can they invest in this industry? Unfortunately, and I'm realizing it now, unfortunately in Romania you do not have any investment fund whatsoever which invests in hospitality. Yes, you have real estate funds, obviously, open-end, alternative investment funds and so on. You have it, but only for the tangible assets of this part of the story. But you don't have it in hospitality. Why is this happening? Well, most probably due to the fact that only 4% of the hotels are, let's say, within larger groups and so on. And I think on the other hand, for the Romanian market, everybody who has a flat, especially that I'm coming from Cluj and there everybody is an owner and also a small business owner because they rent their flats. I think that everybody sees hospitality as just renting something instead of adding value, and I really appreciate all of you for what you are doing, because I realize what the added value for hospitality is. It's the service. It's the way in which I find my bottle of water on the table when I enter the room. It's just this QR code that you are talking, everything which make it easy. On the other hand, I can tell you that the problems that you are raising here are the same for other industries, for instance, for the banking industry. We have the same QR code. We have the same investments in the IT, which sometimes they are lacking because most probably you have higher needs and higher willingness to be serviced by the banks, and we are lagging behind. So it's somehow the same story, but the truth is that in this business, in hospitality, first of all, there comes the capital.
Thank you for that clarification, or a very, very erudite, I would say. Anybody else got any questions then in regard to that, or is that fairly clear now? Thank you. In which case, I'd like to turn then to my second question, which are, what are the most effective techniques for valuing hotel assets, and how can these valuations influence investment decisions?
I'm happy to take that one, as I teach it day in, day out. Rémi Rand has, for the RICS in Switzerland, once done a presentation about the 17 valuation methods for hotels, starting with the Cocan multiplier and ending with the DCF method. But I would just like to focus on the most important one and the best one that I think. So I think the method to use is a 10-year DCF. That's the best thing you can do for
10-year
valuation.
discounted cash flow.
Discounted cash flow model, exactly. So you forecast the cash flow for the next 10 years. You explicitly think about what can I really sell it for in 10 years. You find the right discount rate reflecting the risk of the asset. And we had some discussions this morning. It doesn't matter if it's an economy hotel or luxury hotel. In the market, there is a difference that we see in the discount rates. So for luxury hotels, it tends to be much lower than for the economy ones, which may be related to location, but there are, at least investors perceive risk differences here. And once you value the asset, you value the cash flows of the asset at the asset level, but you can expand the analysis to the investor, including the financing structure. Some investors, like private equity, will go for more aggressive structure than others, let's say high net worth individuals. So you can take into account taxation, and you can take into account a major conversion of the asset in year 5. So it's very explicit. And with most of the other methods, you can't do that. For example, one method that I know many investors really like, sometimes more than the DCF, is the direct cap method. So you take the first year cash flow and then you capitalize it with the current cap rate. And that has limitations, because what if you do a major conversion of the hotel in 3 years? You will have an entirely different cash flow. You will have to pay for that. So it's very static, it's very short term, but it's a good method if you're sitting in a taxi and if you're wondering what is the value of that Crown Plaza. Yeah, you can quickly get a rough estimate of that.
Like on the back of an envelope almost, right? Like on the back of an envelope almost, right?
Exactly, it's
Yes,
like a
yes.
back of the envelope. But it's very limited. And you're like, if the market is, let's say, exuberant, if the market is too optimistic, you're going to capitalize with a too low discount rate. If the market is too pessimistic, you're going to discount with a too high cap rate. So if the market is too high, you're going to end up with a value too high. If the market is too low, you end up with a value too low. So you're just following the market. Whereas with a DCF, let's say we are really in a crisis and prices are dirt cheap. With a DCF, you can model in the exit value in 5-10 years, you can model a recovery, a reasonable recovery, right? Like COVID was pretty clear, it wouldn't go on forever. And if you're in a boom, maybe you should be a bit more conservative with your exit value in 10 years, because we can't count on a boom to persist that long. There's one other method which is interesting. It's the cost approach. How much would it cost to rebuild the hotel here? How much would it cost to rebuild the Crown Plaza? It's interesting because I know many very sophisticated investors, Blackstone, Brookfield, they look at the replacement cost. So they like to invest if they know that they are paying a price below replacement cost. So I would say it's an interesting indicator that an investment can be profitable, but I wouldn't use it as a major valuation method. Yeah. To give you one example, currently in the US, there's the Park Hotels and Resorts REIT, which is a former spin-off of Hilton. So it owns all the nice upper upscale Hilton hotels in the US. And the replacement cost, according to management, is like $700,000 a room. But the current implied market valuation of the REIT, if you look at the market cap and the debt, is $270,000. So currently that REIT trades at a valuation much below replacement cost, which could indicate an attractive price relative to the valuation.
Thank you. Very explicit information there. Please.
If you want to do a more accurate valuation, and you consider the discounted cash flow, then the replacement value, and then maybe similar transaction, and you want to take an average in between this, how you will weight all three of them for the total fund? So how much emphasis you put on discounted, how much on the replacement value, and how much on similar transactions?
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't.
No,
You would
no. I would take the DCF method, which I feel is the most reliable, providing the assumptions that have gone into preparing the forecasts are as robust as you can make it, and your selection of the discount rate is absolutely spot on. There is no other way, but you use those other methods as giving an indication of a benchmark. So you'll do a direct cap, or you will use the sales comparison method and say, well, you know, these hotels sold for X 100,000 a room. I might put that up because my hotel is a bit bigger or a bit better or whatever, or my hotel is less or whatever. But I would come up with benchmarks and use that to say, okay, I have got the right answer. But I would very rarely influence a valuation decision based on anything other than the discounted cash flow or some way of using that. But I'm more interested in the can of Coke method. And I'm surprised we haven't had a question from the floor about the can of Coke. It only assumes that everybody has been to EHL and has learned it from Remy or from René or whoever, or me even. So that's the best way of valuing a hotel.
Another question, yes.
Just one question. So you suppose that do the market value too, I mean the selling value, yeah? There are three ways, as a matter of fact, not just two ways. For this year, for the discount cash flow, what are you using as a discount?
Yeah. So two approaches are common. I think in the industry, more common is to have the cap rate, the current capitalization rates in the market for assets with similar risk and returns.
That is for a developed market, but
Yeah. Right.
in Romania,
Yeah. So, but I think we saw some cap rates also for Romania, but it's more difficult, especially if we're not in Bucharest. So one other method that comes from the UK is like
you are using what?
the WACC. Yeah. Then you need you need like an equity cost of capital, which you get for stocks, but hotels are private market assets, so it's difficult to get the return on equity. But you can use the risk premium approach. So you start with the risk-free rate in that country, and then you add a risk premium. For example, for an apartment, the risk premium wouldn't be very high because but so for a hotel it would be significantly more, and then it really depends. Is it a luxury hotel? Is it in the best location? Is it old? What are the building risks? But let's say on average for a hotel, maybe you would add a risk premium of 3%, right? If it would be a really great hotel, it could be as low as 2%. If it's a low-end economy hotel at the border of the city, it would be much higher. But it's a big range. So
I don't do it that way. I use a variation of the WACC because most hotels, we find, are financed on a mixture of debt and equity. So we value the equity portion, we value the debt portion, but we also take into account the time value of money, which is also important to take into account. So our little black box comes up with the answer based on various inputs: equity yield, debt ratio, interest rate, and amortization of the debt, and so forth.
So it means the third method that we discussed about selling. I mean, in a market where you don't have enough transactions, it's difficult to, or almost impossible.
it's certainly more difficult, more challenging, and it becomes more of an art than a science. Yeah, that's certainly true for valuations.
To compare
Right.
to hotels which you
Yeah.
don't have a lot of hotels from the same category or
Yeah.
which are
Yeah.
transactioned recently.
Yeah, it will be much easier in Paris or London than for Cluj, just for Cluj, and that's already a bigger city.
You don't combine the three methods. Just keep two with
I think the amount of brain that goes into a proper DCF, that's so much, right? You need like weeks to develop a really good model, and then the direct cap approach, that's something you can do within 1 hour basically. So I wouldn't give that much more weight than that 1 hour. I think that the DCF is the way to go, to really think about all the inputs very hard, do the best possible job. And yes, it's hard and there's a lot of uncertainty, but we can still always do our best possible job, and everyone else still also has to get, the other bidders also. So yeah, as you can still try to do it the best way possible, even problematic information setting.
Yes, but for Romania, we have very good indicator which HBS developed, it's called Innovation Index. You can look at that. You can have an idea.
Yeah.
That is the CF is the model used by here too. Right?
Well, we wrote the book, so it's a good place to start.
I don't think personally that you will find an answer from our answers, because the DCF definitely is good. If now I take the René's 300 basis points and add it to the risk-free rate of Romania, you are already talking about 10%. Yeah. So in terms of cost of capital, perhaps you are talking about 12, 13, 15%, because you are not risk-free as an individual, as an investor. So by the end of the day, I think that it is important to have at least 2 or 3 in front of you, evaluations, and afterwards it's all about negotiation, because in an illiquid market, there is not a bid and an ask all the time in the market. You just enter the Bloomberg and you see the price. It is the art of negotiations by the end of the day.
So generally, the replacement approach, you would look for the value of the land and the current cost to build such a room. There are some indicators out there. I think Whitebridge, I think HVS also publishes one, cost per room. So you can kind of calculate how much would it now cost to build that upscale hotel. And that reflects then the current price of the land, the current labor cost, the current material cost. And so in that sense, yeah, it's the current cost, but it's not reflecting what you can earn in terms of cash flow and return for the future, which is what really matters to investors. But I would say it's an interesting approach, because if the current replacement costs are much higher, then it means basically nobody will build a new hotel, because it's much more efficient to buy an existing hotel. So you will not have that much new supply in the future. But if demand grows anyways, like it seems to be currently happening in Romania, then it makes for a good investment case.
The other use for the replacement cost method is when you're looking at a new hotel, and when you're valuing a new hotel, you want to know what the income capitalization value is, because that's what you're really going to earn in the future. And then you compare it with what the real development costs are in total to make sure that the value is more than the cost of getting there. And that's a salutary lesson for some people at times.
Now, as it was mentioned, the art is really in the P&L projection. And that's where some difficulties appears, and that's sometimes negotiation with the asset manager who are going to bring on the table some improvement of EBITDA that is going to be brought by CapEx and so on. So there is a kind of art discussion happening between the valuators and the asset manager to reach a certain value. So it's still a very art and a negotiation process, kind of.
You said
I would
including the inflation?
Yes, that model of P&L for 10 years, for example,
Includes inflation.
it's inflated. You're sure, otherwise it's not just multiplying the same value.
No,
That is a very simple, very easy way to do, but it's not, how to say, accurate.
Yeah. No, you can really forecast explicitly the ADR, and you can use a different growth rate for the ADR than for, let's say, your personal cost. If there is a raise in the minimum wage law in 2 years, you can explicitly model that jump. So I think it's the most realistic way.
It's one of the risk factors. One is, okay, you control, let's say, the rates, ADR, yeah? You are deciding that I position my hotel in that market segment, and I would like, let's say, I have a competitive set, primary or secondary, and I can control it. But
But the occupancy, right?
that means automatically to happen
Yeah.
average occupancy.
So,
So I may say that I don't know that if your model is fitting that part, but you can just have different scenarios, and the banks are asking for it. And when, let's say, one of, for example, the cost of operating, the total cost of operating, it's have a difference for a certain scenario of 1%. If the net value, yeah, it's should be not more than 4%. Yeah, is it then? Of course, you can have a graphic with this one, and you can see when it's really a danger.
yeah, for the market value, you would always model the expected value. You know, like there are multiple scenarios, but you would really model the most likely, what you really think is most likely to happen. And of course, we know there can be a recession. Recessions happen, but you wouldn't model a recession. You would, that is reflected in the discount rate. So that risk premium that I mentioned of 3%, for hotels maybe on average, because hotels are very sensitive to the economy, so that is reflected in the discount rate, but the cash flows are really the base case. And for the banks and for yourself, you can create an optimistic and a pessimistic scenario to make sure that even in a pessimistic scenario you don't go broke, so that you don't take too much leverage. That's important. But for
But nevertheless, I think it's more than 3 to give you an idea, to give you a trend.
oh yeah, I think for the average hotel it's more than 3. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. If it's okay with everybody, I'd like to move on to the second part now, because we'll make sure we're out by 5 o'clock, in which case then we've got just 2 short presentations looking at hotels and energy efficiency, especially related to carbon emissions and how this can affect the hotel's profitability. Again, it's Rennie that would come here. Thank you for that.
So I'll be relatively quick because I think we're a bit behind with the time. Okay, excellent. So that was Augusto's presentation.
This time it will have another copy.
Okay. Oh, where's mine? We don't. But no, I can't.
Presentation should be here. We go from time to each other.
So we have my picture. We also have my slides. If not, no problem. I can tell you what it's about. Yeah. No, that's still Augustus. Yeah. Do you have other slides? Like us?
You look very handsome here.
Thanks.
But it's quite interesting because just in the summer I went to Kenya. So I asked a couple of people from Marriott International what was going on in terms of management contracts and investment and everything else. And I spoke to the ex-president international of Marriott. And he said, well, you know what's happening, of course, in Marriott in the US? No management contracts. No ownership. I mean, of course, they were asset light before. Now it's just pure franchise model. Even with the top brands that they would operate. And so it's quite interesting when you come to Romania and you hear only 4% are branded, right? The 4% are branded.
And I say it's a matter of risk.
It's a matter of risk.
Right.
Yes. So,
It's a matter of overall economy, and it's a matter of net disposable income and so on. I mean, we have to catch up with Eastern Europe, and the hospitality is about people, but people have to be in the right place and earning enough money in order to be able to afford this kind of hospitality. So I think that for you in the hospitality business, Romania is the future, because there will be large changes in this regard and investment.
in terms of
I don't know any other sector in Romania which is so low represented. I mean, take all the commodity businesses in Romania. That they are well-established, big names. You take a look to the banking sector; it's the same. You take a look to the retail; it is. But in hospitality, we are just discovering that we don't know our competitors.
Okay, I've just been informed that we probably don't have the slides, but that's not a big problem. I can still talk
René,
about
I
it.
was buying time.
Sorry?
Buying time for you.
More time for us. Okay, perfect.
Very impressively, if I may say.
Yeah, I just wrap up the study. So the topic is about the impact of energy efficiency on hotel valuations. We had a great panel this morning about energy. We know sustainability is a topic some are more, some are less passionate about, right? The next US president is probably a bit less passionate about it than others. But we know that in 4 years there will be another US president again.
You can't guarantee that.
We can't guarantee that, right? But it's, yeah, we talked about the waves, and I'm also a believer in those waves. So in 10 years in the future, thinking about the 10-year DCF, when you plan to maybe sell your hotel, it could be the case that climate, energy efficiency, sustainability are again important and big topics. And you may be getting your hotel ready for that over the next 10 years. You know, in 10 years, global warming may be 1% higher than it is today. There may be a more green president. We don't know. So I think that, and also the safe way is just not to blow too many carbon emissions into the air. That's how humanity got a long way up until 100 years ago. So it's a bit of a trendy topic, but what is also a fact is that right now energy costs are extremely high. So when you can have an energy efficient hotel, you're going to save on energy costs and you're going to have higher cash flows. So there are lots of reasons, there we go with the slides. There are lots of reasons why you may want to have an energy efficient hotel. And I did a little study, and I'm going to show you the results today, whether there is a valuation impact of energy efficiency for hotel transaction prices. Looking at the different real estate sectors, hotels are diverse in terms of carbon emissions. Hotels are diverse in terms of energy inefficiency. So, of course, we all go to hotels, we take a shower there. That is very energy intense. So if we have the European Union or others that get serious about reducing the emissions, real estate is a huge contributor, and within real estate, hotels are among the worst. So they're probably going to be tackled by future legislations. And if we wanted to be, maybe next slide please, if we wanted to be compliant with the net zero goal for the year 2050, then these are the reductions in energy intensity that we would need to achieve for hotels. So basically, over the next 25 years, hotel carbon emissions would have to fall by 70 to 90% for different countries. So that's a lot. How is that even possible? How is that even possible? Next slide. So here, there are actually some ways that could be achievable. For example, more efficient insulation of the asset, clean energy sources, a solar panel on the roof. You educate your guests, you educate your staff, and big achievements are possible. Also, if the energy becomes cleaner, we saw long-term Romania wants to rely on nuclear energy, which is free of carbon emissions. So if the grid is entirely clean, that also benefits the emissions of the hotels. So it's not easy, but theoretically it's possible to drastically lower the carbon emissions of a hotel. And that can be very beneficial for us as investors as well. So I did a little study with UK hotels. So we have a sample of 1,000 UK hotels that have been transacted over the last 10 years. And in the UK is the most transparent real estate market in the world, even more transparent than the US, even more, yeah. So you can find the energy efficiency scores of the commercial real estate buildings on the internet. So we were hand collecting the energy efficiency scores for the hotels, combined them with the transaction value and with some characteristics, with the hotel age and so on and so forth. And then we looked at the distribution and we looked at the transaction prices. So here you see distribution of the sample. Energy efficiency of A, B, that is assessed in the UK, means they are extremely energy efficient, so they consume very little energy, and E, F, G is very inefficient. Right, we have the same systems throughout Europe. In France, Remy, I think, will be able to tell you, if you have an apartment in Paris that is rated F or G or lower, you cannot even rent it anymore at the moment. That's how strict the French politicians are. It's not that strict in all the countries, but it may become more strict over the next few years. So that's a risk for investors today. If you have a very energy efficient hotel today, will you be able to sell it in 10 years? Who knows? Which political party will be at the helm by then? So yeah, what is the impact of energy efficiency on the hotel value? we found that hotels with an energy efficiency score of A and B trade at a 16% premium compared to those rated A, B, and C. So no, that should be those in the middle. And those with a very bad rating, D, E, F, these are the lowest ratings, they trade at a discount of 10% compared to those in the middle. So these results, which are still preliminary, it's not a published study yet, and it may be, they're always like data and measurement issues, but directionally these are the results that we get. And that means that investors in the UK currently already price the energy efficiency, right? And that premium could become bigger or smaller over time, but it's a factor. So we as hotel investors, when we have a maybe energy inefficient asset today and we want to sell it in 10 years, you know, even if we don't care about energy efficiency, maybe we just want to maximize the cash flows, the returns. Fine, if you own the asset forever, but maybe you have to refinance the loan. We know there are some banks who don't give loans anymore to assets that are very unsustainable, so you may have a refinancing risk depending on how strict the banks get. And to whom do you sell it to? So for some investors, a sustainable portfolio is very important. They launch a fund, a green fund that makes the investors feel good. They will be the buyer for the sustainable assets, but they will not be a buyer for the unsustainable assets. So if you have an energy inefficient hotel, your pool of potential buyers is smaller. And transaction prices, they are defined at the margin, at the marginal buyer. So you want to make sure you have the person really paying the maximum to you. So I think if you speak about asset management, we want to maybe think about a long-term strategy where over the next 10 years we can make measures that are sustainable but also profitable. So we want to optimize the energy efficiency, have lower costs, and ideally be able to sell it for a higher price. Maybe get a green certification over the next 10 years. And I think it's maybe not the worst of strategies, but of course it always depends. So in my view, in terms of asset management strategies, without sustainability, there are like 100 things you can do. And then there are like 50 sustainable things you can do. And I think we want to find the overlap of the 20 things that make sense monetarily, financially, but also from a sustainability view. Thanks.
Very fascinating. Thank you for that. And also great to have an optimistic view of something coming in the same direction rather than all the time competing. And I think now Remy's going to talk a little bit about hotel asset management and value creation. Thank you. And we have just about 10 minutes to go.
Oh my God. No pressure. No pressure. Slide or no slide? So anyway, sorry.
Can I take them out? Hello? Yeah. Russell already mentioned the asset management and the role of the asset management. So, as he mentioned, it's the owner representative. And that's the first word is the owner is the important word for me, is what is the objective of the owner? And that's where you have to focus because all your decision as an asset manager will be linked to the objective of the owner. And then effectively the role of the asset management is just to create value for the owner, and you create value from the buying, starting from buying the asset, managing and unlocking the value of the asset, and then sells the asset. So the whole cycle goes through like that, from buying, legal tax management, brand management, operation management, CapEx management, ESG management, valuation process, cash management, as Russell was mentioning, cash is king, and setting the process. But all your decision will be based on the objective of the owners. And just to illustrate it, apparently Romanian is still a high net worth owners operator model, which may have, and it's changing. What I've heard today is it's changing, and then investors are coming slowly into the market, and those investors got different perspective of not longing the asset on a long-term basis, but more on a short-term basis. Therefore, the decision process will be completely different. And as well, within the cycle of ownership of holding, your decision at the beginning of owning the asset where you can flow a lot of capex, while at the end of the ownership, then you start cutting costs to increase the EBITDA and the value. So that's what I did want to share with you about the OSA asset management within a few minutes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Question?
Any questions? Ah.
My question is actually a combination for you and Mr. Baldwin, because so I work primarily on the value add side. I've been working with the PE fund owner operator, so I went from actually managing it to doing the projections, the underwriting, exiting assets, and buying portfolio of assets. And the latest one that we've actually worked on was acquiring roughly 20 plus properties in the UK, which are some of them built in the 70s. So you get this project.
Be careful, she's testing you because she's an alumni.
You know, he was a very good student of ours.
And was obviously we have to think, because those were built in the 70s.
Yeah.
Physically, I'm not allowed by the state to keep it into that EPC rating of energy. So if it's a C right now, by a certain year you have to be in B, and even later in A. So I have to develop that. But those are properties that need a lot of redevelopment.
Yeah.
And we are buying them with the aim that they will be repositioned.
Yeah.
There's capex budgets that are still making it an attractive return at the end.
Yeah.
Involve more than just the energy.
Yeah.
And when you're changing, at least in the UK, because your study was based on the UK, and those correlate, is their properties in bands B, that this means structure works, such as changing pumps, putting sprinklers in, which are more energy. And then on the asset management side, you have to manage the whole capex program, which you'd assume that you've underwritten it for, let's say, 60 million of repositioning the whole hotel. But then you find out that you have to be in band B in 3 years, and I have to put pumps. So therefore my capex goes to 8 million. That's it.
Right.
And my IRR drops below the minimum return that I'm looking for, so therefore it's not attractive for me. How do you sort of argue or find solutions to kind of bridging this mandatory amount of money that for some investments that can look very profitable as an exit and shouldn't be left aside, and to bypass these sort of challenges that you might say no because of the work and money that it's implied without even looking at it necessarily.
Yeah, great question, and thank you for the example. I think the key is you want to buy these assets at the right price, because that then gives you a potential margin of safety. That's, I think, also why we saw the discount in my study, right? So without some sort of discount, it's going to get difficult to get satisfactory returns with such an approach. And it sounds like huge work, and you have the risk that regulations becomes even more stricter, which seems to be happening in your case. Now I think we've probably reached a tipping point based on what we've also heard throughout the day. Maybe not for the UK, we have to see. But yes, of course, with every redevelopment, there's also a risk that it could become even more expensive, and you have a huge portfolio, and all of them are unsustainable. So it's like also not something, there's just one asset you need to refurbish. No, it's like a big portfolio, so it needs time. And I think it's really crucial that to take on such a project, you do it at the right price, so low enough price, a discount. That's the only remedy that I see that then justifies taking the risk, because the alternative is you just buy very energy efficient, sustainable assets, but they probably come at a premium, right?
Yeah, no, it was based off of like throughout the policy situation, not necessarily asset-light specific.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head at the beginning of what you said. If you're going to buy that group of assets and you're in competition, you not only have to look at it from your perspective, but you also have to put yourselves in the shoes of other buyers that are maybe looking at it a different way and may offer more. And then you have to evaluate, well, is offering more the right way for my group to go? Can we sustain that? If I have a huge capex bill as a result, what is the impact on the P&L? What's the impact on the cash flow? If I invest all of that money, will I still get the same return, or will I actually get an increased return, and value that into your, and then you have to account for the risk of doing that and whatever. But at the end of the day, this is not, people always say, is valuation an art or a science? It's both. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And what one person looks at a hotel or a group of hotels and says, okay, this is what the value is based on the information that I've given. And this is someone else's view of what that value. So some people can take a completely different view of the same information and come up with a different number. That's why I love teaching valuation to students, because when we do this exercise in class, we often get 30 different answers, all from the same information. So you have to bear all of that into account. And good luck.
I think,
Yeah.
sorry, just for a quick follow-up, is I think my point of the question was, thanks for raising that, would be, if you were not to be looking at the investor profile, has it been researched, let's say, for instance, like HBS in the Netherlands are doing those sort of studies, has it been researched to which extent should we go on the redevelopment side, on energy, from an energy standpoint, or you should buy already an energy efficient asset? What's the bridge between when is one of the two more attractive if you were to level the investor profile?
There's not been any research that I'm aware of.
Yeah. I hope that I'm the first one to do that. I've also, because as a researcher, you need an innovation in order to be able to publish it. And I've also spoken with some practitioners like 2 years ago in sustainability. They said there is no study and it's impossible to measure it. And when we would have the time to go into the details, what I did is another valuation method, a hedonic valuation method. And that has also its flaws. But yes, it's totally right. There's no research on that. But I think it's a market. So I think there's also a big opportunity, because if you buy a bad energy efficient asset as at a big discount, you make it energy efficient, you sell it for a big price in 10 years or 5 years. I think that's what many private equity funds go for. I've spoken to some private equity fund investors recently. They are all very optimistic, actually. I'm also very optimistic about existing hotels in place due to demographic developments. All the baby boomers are going to retire. They have money. They have now much more time. We see the shoulder seasons expanding. I just checked up the STR data. Madrid, Barcelona, Bucharest, they all have occupancy rates in October of 85%, 85%. And that's maybe just the beginning, because that demographic wave of the baby boomers going to retirement, that will happen over the next 10 years. So I think there are good reasons to be optimistic given the very high replacement cost for existing hotels. So if you do a good job managing the asset, there's a good potential for good returns.
Okay, so I've got a challenge here. René, have you heard of the EEA?
The Energy Alliance?
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's both of us speak with Ufi Ibrahim, and let's put the challenge out to her and whatever, and let's see if we can't generate the information that will enable you to write the paper that you want to make your professorship absolutely solid.
That would be fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone, for the questions. We might say thank you for staying this long and asking the questions right up to the final. So I think that's a good indication of the quality of the panel here. We'd like to thank the panel for their expertise and their experience and their wisdom.